We're snorting cap rates and shooting up cash flow here at Deal Junkies. Welcome back to Deal Junkies.
Your voice cracked a little bit.
I'm going through puberty.
Me too.
We're back. We're back. All right. So, we are back, the four of us, in the studio to talk to you about knowing your audience and knowing your markets. So, how do you change your strategy when you've got a different type of seller, knowing what the seller motivation is, their age, what goals they're trying to reach, versus when you know your markets and where markets are going? And I have certain questions for Mike about Portland. I'm very interested to know.
I have a question on some markets. That didn't make any sense. I have a question on whatever. So when you're looking at your markets, you're just trying to figure out population growth and population trends and workforce trends, correct? No? What else, Dane?
More than that.
So
what deal type are you talking about?
Just any market you're looking at, because you're looking for increasing population. You're just trying to find a place that's not decreasing in population.
I think it depends on who you are as a buyer, and if we were buying 5 states away, we would look at different things than if we're buying in our backyard.
So, to give you an example, so we're talking about this deal that's 60 something units in a 8,000 person market that we've never invested in before.
Yep, new market.
And my thought is, I like the deal. I don't care about the market. It's close enough to all these other markets where we get property management and we get all the other things we like out of the deal.
Yeah, the first question I asked you is, are you the largest project in this market? And you said yes.
Yes.
That is just instinctually scary to me. I don't know why.
Gabe's got good instincts.
So what do you look at? Like, if I'm looking at the market, what should I be looking at?
Well, most people won't go to a market with 8,000 people. So if you're trying to raise money, so you would never sell that to a syndicator. It'd be hard to find a lender to get on board unless you're very close to a large market. So you're looking for local lenders, local investors, local, management, all the infrastructure that you have to have around this small town. A very small town like that might be right next door to a million person city, which would be a different conversation than if it's just out in the middle of nowhere. So is this close to a large metropolis?
Yeah. It's kind of in between a few medium-sized metropolises.
What's the income stream? How do people make money there?
The average income. So the average income it was normal. The average home price was like 400 something thousand. Average income.
But what I'm asking is, how do they make money?
Yeah, so they make money there's a lot of tech going into this area now recently, and then a lot of agriculture.
Meaning like
they food production type of things happening because it's in an area where it's around where food is grown and needing to pass through and travel through. So I think it's central to, and they have a lot of food manufacturing plants.
Okay, so now what you're talking about, you're going down the thought exercise of, is this a growing market or not? What you don't want, think about what we need for renters. We need more people and more jobs, and we need less people to go there and build buildings, right? So it's just supply and demand. And so if you don't have a lot of people, this is why we're killing it in Astoria and Seaside, because nobody's been building there for the last 30 years. So we saw demand because we own other buildings, and we went and built stuff there, but it was really hard to find investors. It was really hard to find lenders. It's really hard to find insurance. Like, it's in a market that not a lot of people understand. So it's not something you can easily go sell, borrow, or find money for. So, if you have lenders on board, you're in an 8,000 person market. It's not big enough. If what I'm getting at is if all of those people are working for a food plant and that food plant shuts down, your 60 unit project is worth 0. You're in a ghost town. So that's the problem with a very small market. If it's showing signs of hope that it's going to be bigger, and there's industry there, and there's, it's like, it's in an outside sister community to these larger places that are all growing, and it's just nobody's gone there yet because nobody has seen it, and we just saw it first. That's what you want to do, is you want to go. There are people coming to Salem right now that see Salem as an emerging, it's like we're going from a large town to a small city. It's probably why we got overbuilt over the last couple of years. It's because everybody was so bullish on what Salem could do, and now they've seen but we can only take so many doors, and then we're overbuilt, and so then people back off the gas pedal a little bit.
Yeah, I think I try to
we 4 ideas together here. So the thought of know your market versus know your audience. Know your market's a very macro statement. Know your audience is a micro statement. Intrinsic and extrinsic, right? So every market has this just extrinsic value. That's your demographics. That is, do you have migration patterns? Is your population growing? Do you have job growth? Is your job growing? But then your intrinsic value is know your audience. So how do you fit in what you want to do, fit into the demographics of that market segment? And so then that's where it gets into, well, are you using agency debt? Are you using bank financing? Are you using community financing? Are you using seller financing? What are your strategies? So you can go to a really small town. If seller financing is just your strategy, it's probably really useful because that's the main tool in that area. But if you're trying to build big 66 unit apartment buildings and you're looking at agency debt, now tertiary markets become a little bit more difficult. So you can have really good macro demographics, but that may not be good for what you're intrinsically trying to do. So know your audience. Who are you trying to work with? And is that a good spot to do what you want to do from a working standpoint? I had this conversation the other day with Ryan Hiltimus, which is like asset class. I think asset class is the biggest joke out there because you don't, in my mind, you shouldn't define asset class by what that asset class offers. You should define asset class based on your personality type and what your resources are and what you want to do, where you want to do it, so you have a holistic approach on it. That's more of an intrinsic side, and then knowing your audience and what does it take to operate.
So you're saying when people go like, what is the best asset class?
Yeah.
It's a question you can't answer because it's a personal question.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who kill it in storage, people who kill it in land development, people who kill it in apartments. I've always said that, real estate's very unique, just like people are.
Yep.
And everybody's got their own thing. And it may be, multifamily's always kind of been the darling, but that means everybody's chasing it.
Yeah. And so harmony is matching what you invest in with what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And if you should do a really unique, funky asset class, like
a care facility.
Like a care,
like a detox.
Have you thought about care facilities? That seems like up your alley.
Doesn't it? Fits my personality. I'm a little quirky.
Mm-hmm.
Probably admit me into that mental health institute
care.
at one point. And I care. I have a heart.
So then the other thing is you don't always invest in one asset type. And so usually most of us have a blend,
Mm-hmm.
and that you're just heavily weighted in maybe one or two different types of asset types. For me, what I came to the conclusion, and this is just more recently, is that I like to do business to consumer style real estate versus business to business. So I love apartments. I love mobile home park. I love self-storage. All of that stuff lines up with me because I'm dealing with a customer. Whereas office and retail and industrial is now business to business. And my mindset, my infrastructure, my team is not aligned as well. We could do that business if we want, but it's just not really what we specialize in. So just naturally, I am sort of just veering off and focused on the business to consumer real estate.
And your ethos, make friends and have fun, works much better in the business to consumer world than it is the business to business world, where the business to business is more corporate, more stale, more boring, more blah, 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 blah.
Stuffed shirts.
Yeah, stuffed shirts.
I'm part of the ragtag rebel forces, man. I'm just not a stuffed shirt. I can't do it.
Can't do the suit.
Can't do the suit and tie.
Yeah.
When's the last time you wore a suit?
In my headshot. When I
You bought it.
I bought it just for the headshot.
10 years ago?
No, actually, we went to a couple of fundraisers. I think I had to put it on. That is my least favorite day, when I have to put the suit on.
The last fundraiser that we went to that you dressed up for was a black tie affair, and everybody wore a suit. And you showed up in a trench coat with just like a
trench coat, and that's it.
Yeah.
Your
golfer, your hat, and your
golfer,
your golfer, Irish
your Scottish golfer hat.
Yeah, that was funny.
You wrote that thing, your trench coat, and then just
Trevor goes, Gabe looks like the mob.
Well, Trump went to the Pope's funeral in a blue suit, and he was in a sea of black. So you got to stand. You got to find a way to stand out.
You did.
Thank you.
Okay, let's veer back because I want to talk about Portland.
Knowing your audience, I think, is the fundamental of communication. And that's kind of what I wanted to get into. So whether it is, who are you communicating with? Are you negotiating, trying to buy real estate? Are you talking to a vendor or a contractor trying to do a project? And so sellers have lots of different avatars. You're going to communicate with those different people in just by knowing who that audience is. So are you contacting a broker? Is it an estate attorney? Is it a personal rep for the estate? Is it the brother of the personal rep for the estate no one's taking any action on? Is it the property owner that's done 100 real estate deals? Is it the person that this was an owner-occupied resident that they've owned for 5 years and they've never done anything else? And so the way that you communicate with these people and understanding how do they communicate and then using the information in the right manner. So dovetailing back onto that deal that I just got verbally, which I have full belief, like 99.9% I'll own that property in 2 weeks. And it was because of how I communicated with him. And as we got down to it, as he starts to do the takeaway, which is I've got another couple parties looking at it, he starts giving you that. And then you're like, ah, shit. But then he talked about it. I said, yeah, they're fishy. And that was his response, is they're fishy. I was like, oh yeah, they're wholesalers. And he's like, they just way too much information. They just had to give me weight, which is shady, right? Like they don't know how to communicate in a way to appease him, to give him the information that he needs to know without overloading it, because my partner's and this partner and this, and I need some due diligence, and well, we can't do a land sale contract. It's got to be, whereas my conversation with him was really quick. Oh yeah, I do a land sale contract. Awesome. Do you have your own land sale contract? Oh yeah, I've done 50 of these. I have my land sale. It's really simple. It's one I want to use. Awesome. Can we do this through escrow? Oh yeah, I've got an escrow lady. Here's her phone number. She's already working on a prelim. We're going through this process. Great. Does she have a copy of your blank land sale contract at it? Oh, she probably does. Oh, and then, you can just go down there and you can just sign an earnest money agreement. So no offer, no purchase agreement. And so understanding your process. So you change your process based on your audience. And so after I had this done, I sent a video to my acquisitions team, just kind of like, hey, you're just kind of excitement. And my acquisitions manager, great. I'll start writing up the offer when you that's his process. Okay, great. Send me the address. I'll start. No, there is no offer. That is not happening here. I'm going physically to escrow. I'm going to bring them a cashier's check. I'm going to sign their little 1-page earnest money agreement that says, here's the earnest money taken. Here's our price. That's it.
Is that considered under contract at that point?
At that point, because it's an agreement in escrow. And again, know your audience. I'm not concerned about him selling it to someone else. He's in his thing was, his first statement was, oh, well, if you're really poor, I'll sell it 10% down on a land sale contract for a year. And I was like, well, what if I'm not really poor? And he goes, oh, well, just act like you are. I'm a pretty vain man. Right. And so while I'm not writing this up in my development company, this is a land sales contract. I won't own it. So I'll put it in my own personal name. Right. So again, how does he want it? He doesn't want to see my company on that land sale contract. And so I do things a little bit differently because my audience is significantly different than kind of our typical audience that we work with. And then that's when it becomes really more fun. That's the art behind it, right? It's not scientific. You're out of your process. Literally, I'm going to go look for when can I go fly to Florida and go visit him and go golfing with him.
Where does he live in Florida?
One of the old communities. One of the old communities, which that's a good sign.
So he knew when you picked up the phone, he's done this 50 times. He's 90 years old. He knew he was talking to a real buyer who's done this. Everybody else is calling him, giving him all the riffraff. Mm-hmm. You pick up the phone and it's like, two good old boys. Yep. We've been around this block before. I want your deal. How are we going to put this together? Just right through the bullshit.
And we built the rapport based on doing the deal. There wasn't any bullshit of you fish, you golf. Yeah. We didn't build rapport until the deal was done.
Yeah. Now we can be friends.
And that's how, because he's a deal junkie and I'm a deal junkie. It's like, oh, let's do it. This is awesome. You're kindred spirit. Let's go. And then it's like, oh, you live in Florida. Oh, well, I love to golf. I can go visit you there. Oh, well, I live in a golf course. Yeah. So
cool. Are you going to stay at his house with him?
Oh, hell no.
Trevor would.
I mean,
Trevor would be like, I don't want to pay for a hotel.
You got to really get to know him.
If we're hanging out on the lanai having a little beverage and it's sunset goes down and there's a bed right there, I might not say no. Whoa, but I'm not going to.
What are you trying to do?
A guest bed. A guest bed.
It depends on how many more deals are there in this.
A guest bed. Yeah.
There's a bed right there on the lanai. Let's go.
I tell you what.
How many more deals do you have?
I mean, he's doing a land sales. You guys are already in bed together.
One of the coolest things I've heard is I listen to this podcast called My First Million. It's one of my favorite podcasts. I think you listen to it too, right?
No.
Okay, never mind. But they do this thing where they meet really cool people and they just ask, like, can I just come stay with you for like 3 days a week and see what your life is like? And they just go hang out with them at their house assimilated into their family, and they're like, it's the coolest thing you could ever do.
Assimilated in
I think that's right.
They adopt you for 3 days.
Yeah, it sounded awesome to me.
That's what I do with you guys.
It's true.
One of the best.
I've been assimilated by Gabe.
One of the best books is Blake. What's the Blake, the NetJets guy? Blake.
Jesse
Itzler.
Jesse
he did that
Itzler.
with
Sarah
Blake
Lively's
Sarah
husband.
Blakely.
Sarah. Yeah.
Sarah Blakely.
Mhm.
I get all my. So Jesse Itzler,
Itzler,
hired David Goggins to live with him.
He didn't
for
even
a
hire
week.
him. It was free. He just asked him. He said, "I want some."
It was free?
Yeah. He said he saw him running a race, and he's like, "Whatever you got, I want part of that in my life."
Yeah.
And then so he called him, and David Goggins goes, "Any motherfucker crazy enough to ask me to live with them, I'm crazy enough to do it." And he goes there for 30 days.
Yep.
They write the whole book. Have you read that book?
Yes,
it's a sick book.
Really good on Audible.
Yeah, you can go on ChatGPT and be like, "Give me all the workouts they did for those 30
Oh.
days," and they'll write it out for you, and you're like, "Oh shit, this is yeah."
Oh,
it's
like
cool.
they wanted to order pizza one night, and David made him run 20 miles to go get the pizza after their ridiculous day of workouts.
Dude, he said they closed every single deal because in the middle of like they were doing a meeting with Kevin Garnett to get him to like fund something or do something, and they're doing the meeting. Or I think it was for Coconut Water, and in the middle of the meeting, David's like, "Burpees now." He stops the meeting and Kevin Garnett's like, "Whatever you guys are doing, I'm in." And he's like, "We closed every single deal."
Dude, be obsessed or be average. Like that is one of those. That's a Grant Cardone principle, but that book explains it well.
So let's go back to markets. I want to know, like, we're always wondering which markets to go to. Trevor talked a little about what do you look for in a market. The markets we already do know.
We look for Portland, fucking Oregon. That's what we look for.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. I just got off the phone today with a guy. He's a client of mine, and he says, "Hey, I want to do a $10 million deal. I can do it cash, or I want to do up to 20. I can leverage in." I said, "Okay, well, tell me a little more. Like, what areas do you like and not like?" He's like, "You know what? I freaking hate Portland." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I had 3 deals there. They should have been slam dunks. We had to get off of them because of partners. We, got broke even or barely made money or whatever. They just pissed me off. Like, I don't." So, and I said, "Well, I've talked to lots of people, and 9 times out of 10, this is the conversation I have. People go, I want to invest in Oregon, but I don't want to be in Portland." So Portland has a black eye that we've talked about. We've talked about the doom loop and all that. I feel more optimistic that Portland, I'm seeing signs that Portland is like the green shoots are coming up, that it's going to revive again. Mm-hmm. But some of the old guard and the people that are around, like these, especially politically, if you're in your 60s, 70s, 80s, you might be, really pissed at politics in Portland or whatever, or all of Oregon for that matter. And so some of these people who are quite honestly the people with the money to invest in Portland are like, F Portland, I'll do anything but go to Portland. Like anywhere, anywhere in Oregon. We'll go to Antelope. We'll go anywhere you want to go.
We have a deal of that price range for him if you would like it.
God, this fucking deal guy.
Trying to put you a deal.
A 10 to 20 million
Yeah.
is a good deal.
Yeah, it's a a great deal.
All right.
It's over 66
not only a
units
good
on the
deal.
coast.
Stop distracting us.
No, this is a distraction. So, does a guy like that want to be the owner-operator of a deal or just invest and be passive in a deal?
He's looking to be owner-operator.
Why?
Yeah. Well, I guess, and I don't really know. I've only had one call with him about this, so I don't know all of his motivations yet, but I'll learn more. He may just want to invest. Yeah.
I would think a guy like that, because he's probably making so much money elsewhere, it's easier to just, I would imagine.
Just to invest, be LP?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Unless he's a deal junkie. So it's really important to understand that markets have segments and cycles. And different segments work at different cycles. And understanding the market is really, you have to understand what are all those different market segments and what are the cycles working in those market segments. And when you're talking about market segments, that can be asset class, that can be demographics, that can be location, you can cut market segments into various different types of things. And so as an appraiser, that's what we're taught, is to identify your audience, and then you're doing localized micro research based on that market segment. But you have to look at the macro to then define what that segment is.
Can you figure out the macro at all, like reasonably?
That's
like,
the simplest thing, and this is the greatest example of it, is where you have a shortage of housing, yada yada, that comes down from the state of Oregon based on the state of Oregon has this many households and this many housing units. That's it. That's your macro demographic. Okay, well, you can break that down to each jurisdiction, each county, each city, yada yada yada. Then you project based on job growth migration patterns. So that's kind of how you figure out from a macro standpoint. But then the micro aspect of it is, well, we have not a lot of shortage of market rate housing. We have a huge, ridiculous shortage of 30% and under AMI housing, right? So then those different market segments, and then those market segments are going to work in different way, right? So on the actual market value market segment, you just have free market forces of capital coming in and developing, buying land and whatnot, versus we're underhoused in the 30 to 60% AMI. So we create huge buckets of capital that then force private capital to partner with public capital to create that type of. So that's where you need to kind of understand how those cycles are. And so
when you say what do you mean by cycle? I see what you mean by segment, going through all that, but what do you mean by cycle?
Now, cycles happen in different ways, and what drives cycles is sentiment, and that's what Gabe was getting at, is sentiment. So he talks to a lot of investors, and so he understands investor sentiment. And what's really important to understand is the demographics are what's driving the activity, and then the activity gets witnessed, and then that drives the sentiment, and then the sentiment drives the capital, which then defines the cycles of those market segments.
Can you predict that whatsoever to make educated decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, after the Great Recession, the local developers, and this is the action, right? So the local developers see, oh, great. We just had a reset, a deleveraging based on the demographics of our housing units. There is a housing shortage. We don't have a lot of permit activity. Our jobs are growing. Our tech jobs are growing. You can predict the increase, the movement of number of households in the different income brackets. You could predict in 2012 that would significantly move upward, that the growth of households in the 100 plus yearly income and the 200K plus yearly income. Okay, so great. So now you see income is coming into this city at these households, which can afford this type of housing in this location with the amenities that this region provides, which then says I can go build high-end spec housing, or I can go build all these apartments, these luxury apartments. So that is kind of how that generates the supply cycle based on the demand side of it. And so, but then that cycle happens, which is it's regional money. It's local money, then it's regional money, then it's institutional money, and then you have COVID, and sentiment changes based on what we saw physically happen. But sentiment, physically what we saw happen started in March 2020. The bad reputation, the reputation change didn't happen overnight from a capital standpoint. It did from a news standpoint, like literally that first 10,000, 100,000 people on the bridge, the Burnside Bridge, that happened overnight. But the capital sentiment didn't change for months until it started showing up in city council and started showing up in our lack of enforcement of homelessness. And so then you build up over a period of time where the action, which is 6 to 9 months ahead of it, now changes the sentiment. But what you're experiencing now is the people that live there, the people on the street, see that the action right now is 6 to 9 months ahead of the investment sentiment. So right now, investment sentiment is still negative towards Portland. So how does that show up? Demand just stopped going from Portland, and this is more at a commercial finance level, not an income, not a personal residence level as much, but more a business level. You go lease up in the tertiary markets, you buy apartments in the tertiary markets, you entitle land in the tertiary markets, but you avoid Portland. And so what we're seeing right now is you have guys like, big guys at HFO talking to little guys like me to sell apartments. Right, because the big guys who would buy this in a heartbeat and pay the rate that they want immediately, they don't want to be in Portland. They don't want to own it. And so when you say you can see the sproutlings coming out of Portland, absolutely. Those guys don't talk to me 2, 3, 4 years ago, but they're talking to me now because sentiment is so low that they need to get a base of buyers now that believe in the city, that are local, that have local capital, that aren't based on capital from different markets, because those bigger levels of capital, they're not looking at different segments in Portland. Portland is a segment of the bigger macro markets they're looking at. Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah. I was going to ask Gabe, why are people so scared of Portland? It's just the landlord-tenant laws?
It's politics.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't even know that they're scared. I think they're more pissed. Like,
it's layering.
The out-of-state investors scared because they saw it on the news, just like what Mike is talking about. The in-state investor is just, they're just like, they hear all the, political theater and everything that's going on, and they feel like Portland, of all cities in Oregon, are going to be the least landlord friendly ongoing, which is probably an accurate statement. So as they squeeze tighter and tighter and tighter on landlords, that is going to first come to Portland and then spread throughout the rest of the state. So the rest of the state will get that legislation. And so, I mean, I don't know. I don't know that I feel super positive about the politics of Portland changing anytime soon, but I do think that they're realizing that some of the policies that they did have in place were not working, and they're starting to adjust. And I also think that if you just look at the actual numbers and you look at where vacancy was a year ago and where it is today, from almost 10% to 4 or 5%, you look at the pipeline of units coming out of the ground, which was 10 or 15,000, and it's now 1,000 or 1,500. Like, if you take your emotions out of it and you just look at the numbers, you can see that market from a financial perspective is coming back. If you were just to be a robot and make a decision,
trailing indicators and leading indicators,
the data would tell you Portland is a great, because I think Mike is right that we have hit a bottom in Portland. The question I have is, are we a year away from Portland coming back, or are we 10 years away?
Yeah.
If we're a year away, I want to buy everything we can right now in Portland. If we're 10 years away, we're too early.
And in different locations, because now real estate's back to a little bit more locality, it'll have different timelines.
And I'm just talking Portland proper, because we own in Troutdale and all in areas around Portland that do great.
How come you don't own more in those areas? Because that's where the majority of deals are concentrated, just because that's the majority of people. I'm surprised you don't own more real estate.
More deals in Portland?
Yeah, in surrounding
areas. It was
areas.
institutional investors. Like, you built up a huge amount of your portfolio while institutional investors were bullish on Portland.
Yeah, they were buying stuff at a 4 cap.
Yeah, so
nobody was willing to be creative, and I didn't have the means to go buy some of those big deals.
But now people are willing to, and that's why you're the competitor.
And we didn't manage up there yet. I mean, there's a number of things, like SMI is a 50-year-old company. We just went into Portland last year. So, I mean, it's
intrinsically that made sense for where you're at. But to answer your question on the demographics, so you have leading indicators and trailing indicators. So you can watch the news and read trailing indicators and assume Portland's bad, or you can go to the breakfast like Gabe goes to and sees that as developers in Portland in 2019 and 2018, we were calling out 2022 to 2025 as a period of time where we're going to run out of supply, right? So as we're in this huge construction boom, as you're providing this housing, we're very cognizant of we're going to be done in these couple, and now we're in that timeline, which is the leading indicators state we ran out of supply. And even though rents have been flat, and even though they've been down, and even though you have all these concessions, that's because of all the absorption and all the inventory that's been dropped. And even with a population decline, and even with a jobs decline, Portland itself is running out of market rate housing. And so again, now understand the market segment. So you have the entire MSA. The entire MSA is not Portland. It's Vancouver, Portland, Clackamas, Gresham, Hillsborough, Beaverton, comes down to Salem. And so as that sentiment change, money moves quickly. So Portland becomes, after COVID, 6-9 months after COVID, capital gets concerned about Portland. It starts looking at Vancouver, and we're doing a $2 billion waterfront project in Vancouver, and all these buildings start getting built in Vancouver, and then Vancouver starts looking nice, and it's like, oh, we don't like to live in Portland, so now we're going to move over to Vancouver. Here's the best example of it. We couldn't get this deal done, but a few years ago, I was able to negotiate 2 duplexes for $450,000, $225 a pop in Vancouver. They were in land trust, and we could never clear that up, so we could never buy it. It was going to be for my employee. 2 years later, those are worth $550 a piece because the sentiment has changed, and so now 2 to 4 unit properties in Vancouver are worth more than they are in Portland. So But that's a cycle of demand that is going to change.
Because Vancouver used to be not very nice, right? For a while.
No, Vancouver's always been okay, but compared to Portland, it didn't have it. But then Portland became something different, so now Vancouver and so you play off of this, and this is just cycle. And residential cycles have shorter terms than commercial cycles. But for example, like now as a little guy like me, this is the chance to go get the $5 million deal and the $20 million deal and the 20 unit and the 50 unit. Because once that sentiment changes and once the capital goes back from local capital, so it went from institutional back down to local, it's going to go from local to regional to institutional. So if you can get as local capital in front of what ultimately becomes institutional capital, that's just riding the sea, the macro demographics.
I like the fact you brought up Vancouver. I don't think you can have the Portland conversation without bringing
Especially
in
now.
Vancouver. You know, interesting. One thing we should talk about is Washington just passed rent control.
And that's why I brought it up.
So they're 7% plus CPI, 10% max, just like in Oregon.
The entire state.
Mm-hmm. But they've got a 12-year instead of 15-year waiver on new product.
Oh, no.
So it's actually a little bit more strict than what it has on Oregon. So Washington is now going to have the same rules that Oregon, whole West Coast. Started with Oregon, went to California, went to Washington. So we're the first 3 states to have statewide rent control. There are cities around the nation that have rent control. And actually, rent control in its purest definition is like somebody moves out, you can't move anyone back in at more than the rent that somebody else was paying. We have rent stabilization, so as long as somebody moves out, we can reset it to market. So it's a little bit different. We just can't raise it on existing tenants. But Washington is going to change now because of this rule.
Yeah, those properties are going to trade at way lower values.
So Vancouver, same product for product. You take the same exact 100-unit apartment building in Portland versus Vancouver, it's almost double the price to buy that same product in Vancouver. You can sell like a $200 a door inventory in Portland is almost $400 a door in Vancouver,
which is flip-flopped from where it was 10 years ago.
Exactly.
Because of what's changed in Portland. And if you think about it, is okay, they're on both sides of they have different headwinds and tailwinds in each bucket, right? So the rent control law and all the political stuff in Portland, those were all tailwinds on the Vancouver side, and they're headwinds on the Portland side, right? So slowing down Portland, speeding up Vancouver. Well, now that rent control law in Washington becomes a tailwind to Portland and a headwind to Vancouver.
Seattle already had rent control. Is that correct?
They might have had a localized
relocation policy.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
I don't know
how
the
do you
laws
think
up
this
there.
will affect Washington?
Well, I think all you have to do, if you want to know what's going to happen, is just go back in time to
Oregon.
2019. What happened in Oregon in 2019? Rents went up, but also people started deciding they didn't want to invest in Oregon anymore. So you lose outside. So what happens is we lose the competition from outer states. And so for us as localized Northwest investors, we benefit because we're not fighting that institutional investor that Mike is talking about who's coming from New York and Colorado and Texas, and they're coming in here. Most people that are east of Oregon, Washington, California have decided they're not moving their money to the West Coast. Like that has just happened. And so we have a lot less competition. Now, if we want to sell our buildings, like our 40 unit we were talking about in Astoria, and you go, nobody's going to pay $7.5 million. Well, 8 years ago, somebody would have. They would have come from California and they would have bought it because they don't know, right? But,
even to what you're saying, like on the biggest macro of areas, well, Texas is not looking like a great place to continue dumping capital. Florida is not looking like a great place to continue dumping capital. And so right now the sentiment may be we're not going onto the West Coast, but all it takes is the risk return, the cap rate, the inflation risk adjusted return in those different markets to say, well, West Coast is on again relative to the risk and the mitigation based on
and the Sun Belt's running like 12 to 15% vacant.
Yep, because they oversupply.
Those deals don't even pencil.
Because sentiment, right? Capital moves faster than the physical what's happening, and then the actual headlines are behind that. So capital just flows to the Sun Belt, And that's what builders do. You overdevelop because it's really easy to move your capital there. And then now you don't want to move any more capital there. So you're actually looking, well, where else can we move the capital to? And so like Portland, we just moved a lot of capital outside of it. It'll be a time when capital comes back in.
Yeah. I would want to hear more on Sunbelt and Texas and why it's not a good place to invest.
I think it's long-term going to be a good place to invest. I just think that it's very much like, if you look at it from a micro level, if you look at Salem and the way that, we only got 1,000 doors and it screwed our whole market up. Like, I mean, that's a very small example of what can happen when a place gets too much positive press.
Yeah.
And, like, if we wanted to go build something in Texas right now, we'd have tons of investors and banks that would go with us.
Yeah.
I think. And I think that's part of the problem. We try to go to Astoria, you're not going to find the banks and investors to go with us because it's a small market that nobody understands. In other words, like, if you're opening up the newspaper and it's telling you the place to go is Texas, we want to go the opposite direction. Well, we want to go where 9 out of 10 people are saying they don't want to go. That
I would
be
speak to agree in terms of Austin specifically, but the number of people that migrated to Texas
and it's still going to happen.
Last 5 years,
it's still going to keep
and
happening.
not just investors, but people moving there to live there. And part of that is because the vacancy is so high, because it's so easy to build there.
Cost of living's lower.
It's so low.
Right, but the word the question you used is good. Good is a relative term. That is all it is a relative term. Good now in comparison to all the other options. It's just an allocation. Good is a definition of allocation based on your values of how you want to allocate. That will change based on the relativity to something else. So Texas may be good right now because yada, 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 but that won't always be the way. And in this other market, Northwest Arkansas, for example, is now up on the radar. That's really good for a lot of early adopters. So capital is moving there. At one point, the sentiment is going to change and Northwest Arkansas is going to look better than Texas. And so good is now relatively different because that market changed. Not because Texas changed, but because of that relative market change. Because all it is allocation.
Yeah, where am I going to get the most yield? Where are we going to get the most bang for the buck?
Yeah. I don't necessarily disagree. I think just the biggest thing was like the reason that investors moved there was because there were so many people moving there, and that's not slowing down. That's my only like rebut. Well, is that the vacancy's really high, but that's why people are moving there.
Oh, the vacancy's really high just because they overbuilt. It has nothing to do with in-migration. There are more people.
It's always been high there. Though.
It's always been higher than we have
because
here.
It's so easy to build there. Yes. But that's also the appeal to build there.
That is
because
correct.
People are continuing to move there.
That is
and
correct.
People continue to move there because it's so cheap to live there.
You just have to underwrite your deal to know if we're going to Texas, we got to bake in
10 or
12%.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Washington. So don't you think there's a lot of opportunity then with that going into place to buy more deals in Washington? Because every person that has their deal that they didn't raise rent on, their property values just drop significantly.
Yeah, Mike said it best at the SRE meetup at the last one, I think in April, when we had somebody get up and give a speech about how we got to get rid of all these laws and stuff. And Mike got up and he says, "I love these freaking laws.
Yeah,
they make me rich."
Our sponsor came up and talked about getting us all very well.
But Mike is right. I mean, it does.
I gave him kudos before I shit on his idea.
For somebody who is 30-40% below market on their rents, they're effed.
Yeah.
Because you can't.
But again, it's all relative. They're effed.
If you're in Vancouver,
value, they're still fine because they bought it so long
Exactly.
ago.
Their equity's so high, their solution is easy to sell. They're just selling it for less.
If you're looking to sell or refi, you're effed.
Yes.
If you're just sitting on the project, it doesn't matter.
Is there QLRs in Washington?
I believe so. I don't know. I haven't read the law yet. I read the headline that
there's going to be something like that.
There will be something similar to a QLR.
I don't know. I just don't see it being. I don't see it being problematic. I just don't see it being problematic. It makes it problematic from an operations standpoint.
I think that, but like you said, I think this. If you own in Vancouver, no big deal. But I think that if you were looking to sell and get out of Vancouver, I think that Portland is going to be the benefactor to this new law, and I think Vancouver is going to come down in pricing a little, and Portland's going to come up.
I 100% agree.
I think this balances the scales out a little bit.
That just seems like opportunity to buy Washington properties now, because those are our favorite properties to buy that are like that, and now you can't instantly correct it.
Yeah.
So there's more what?
Will be. Because, again, you want to be ahead of the sentiment and the curve. So we're talking 6-9 months down the road, investment sentiment will change. So that's why 6 to 9 months right now is the time to take action.
Isn't this law in place right now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know when it goes into effect.
Oh,
but
it just got approved.
It just got
So
it just
everyone
passed.
has to raise their rents now if they want to.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of notices went out this week.
Yeah, but real estate doesn't move fast. And that's why I say, like, you're not going to see it in the marketplace for probably more than
just once sales are recorded and it takes
activity actually happens, which is why you get in front of it now.
And one benefit that Washington will always have is they have no state income tax. And so people can still enjoy all the things Portland has to offer and live across, the bridge and not have to pay income tax.
And it's really easy from a paperwork standpoint to deal with this. So, like, when this happened in Oregon, we went to all of our low-income tenants, which was like 25% of our portfolio, which we didn't want to give rent increases to. And we gave them huge fucking rent increases and took them to max market rent, some of them higher than that, and then just gave them a 5-year concession plan. Like, here's $1,000 a month increase. Guess what? Year one, there's $1,000 rent concession.
Oh, so you're at your max rent. And
so they're in a long contract. So if they did a scenario, which is once that goes vacant and now you have to rent it at your last contract rent, we've got a contract rent that allows us to do that. So we don't know any of the unknowns. So you just put something on paperwork that makes sense to take care of the unknowns. That never happened, and ultimately they just expired. Yeah. But you can protect yourself around this. This isn't difficult to manipulate or to
I just want to
protect
buy
yourself
deals based on it.
And that's what it does. So that it creates a spurring. Well, I don't want to deal with it. So operations change. So now the mom and pa's can't deal with the operations, no longer desire to deal with the operations. So they sell 1 or 2 years sooner.
Yeah, if you were looking to sell on pro forma and your rents are 35% below market, you're not going to get that value anymore.
Yeah.
So if we want to buy long term and hold in Washington, Vancouver, or Southwest Washington, or all of Washington will be a target market for us because we can manage there.
And everything's relative to everything. Once capital releases and gets cheaper, that will wipe all this out.
Yeah, I think you're always going to have. I think Portland's going to be a great market. I think Vancouver's going to be a great market. I think there will be some balancing that happens, but I'm bullish to go both places. Honestly, I think when you look at deals though, and you start underwriting, Trevor's model is going to tell you want deals in Portland. I think that if you just compared them tit for tat with every single deal you look at, 100% of the time you'll take the projects in Portland.
That's why we're trying to get long-term sustainable debt in Portland.
I love it. All right, guys, should we wrap it up?
Let's go.
All right, guys, thanks a lot for listening, Deal Junkies. Please subscribe and like us, and we will see you next time.